you aren't familiar, Security Breach is a game that is the latest addition in the FNaF series. The FNaF series is very long at this point because we're now at our 9th or maybe even 10th game going on. And I've kept along with looking at the series. I'm actually, if you want to know, I'm the first person on the Five Nights at Freddy's. I always like to mention this because it's a fun fact. I'm the first person on the Five Nights at Freddy's trailer to comment and the first view, and the first person probably other than Scott himself to watch this trailer. Now, almost a few weeks ago, prior to Ruin coming out, there was actually a trailer, and it did showcase a lot. There were some things in the trailer that actually didn't end up in the game, like some voice lines from Gregory talking about basically his message saying, hey, you need to find me. I think it was, I don't know if that's necessarily true or not, but from my memory and from what I recall looking at the DLC, I think some lines in the trailer are not even found in the DLC, but they do give some better context on what's going on. So what I want to do is I want to divide this video into different parts. So the first thing I want to talk about is the setting, because the setting is the thing that, that we're in, right? And according to the setting, there is many things that can change within a setting over time. And we've seen that we've had a lot of changes in the setting over the course of all the games that FNaF has had. So in this case, it's the Pizzaplex, well, more like the decrepit, rundown Pizzaplex, but it is the setting that we have currently. And the question is where, not actually where we are, but when does this take place? Because it seems like it would take place in the future, but knowing the series of FNaF and knowing the things that have, it's always tricky with FNaF. There's a lot of weird time stuff, like a lot of dilation and where we are in the story and how things kind of fit in. So yeah, it is weird for me to go on in this whole thing to suggest that, oh, we totally know what time period we are in right now. Well, I would assume this is not a prequel, because everything kind of indicates that this is after the events of Security Breach. I don't even think anyone doubts that, because, if the Pizzaplex was built, which, here's the timeline. Here's why I think this is the timeline. And Help Wanted, or I guess, yes, FNaF VR, as it's called. There's a DLC that came out for this, and this DLC introduced a lot of different things. One of the things that introduced, or kind of alluded in the DLC for the mall, was in construction. It was being built. But yeah, we see it being built. Then in Security Breach, the following game, we are in that Pizzaplex. So the timeline here seems right? So we have Help Wanted, the Pizzaplex is being built, it's in construction. Then the following game, which I think Security Breach, or no, yeah, FNaF AR came before Security Breach. It probably takes place after the Pizzaplex is being built, because a lot of things kind of come in, because Vanessa is in the emails, I think, for FNaF ARs. So I think this should take place before the Pizzaplex is, open for business. So after FNaF AR, we have Security Breach. In Security Breach, we are in the Pizzaplex. The Pizzaplex is open, and there are people that are in attendance, right? They're coming in and coming out. Gregory, unfortunately, does not come out of the Pizzaplex. Well, I guess he does, in some of the endings he does, but, he is the one that is trapped there during the night. That's the entire plot of the game, is that Gregory is trapped there, and that he has to make it his way out, and has to survive till 6 a.m. This might seem familiar to you, because it is literally the plot for most of the FNaF games. So, after Gregory gets in the get his way out, I guess, or we don't really know what happens. The thing is that we don't really know what happens to Gregory after this point. He seems to be missing after the events of Security Breach, because as far as we're aware, we don't even know who Gregory is. We just know that his name might be Gregory, and Gregory as a name might be his name. We don't really know though, because again, his name wasn't in Fazbear's Entertainment's security system. So if we don't even know who Gregory is, how can we even begin to ask what Gregory is, why Gregory is, how Gregory is, where Gregory is? How can we even ask these questions without even knowing who he is? So that's where I think the most important question is not what Gregory is, because a lot of people think that, he's a human or he's a robot or whatever. But I think it's more important to ask who he is. If we know more about who he is, then we can probably answer all the following questions, the 5 Qs as they're called, and then we can kind of deduce what is going on and what we should pay attention to. Because in the story, we don't even know. As far as we're concerned, Gregory is just some orphan child that was on the streets somehow. We don't exactly know the reasoning or we have to understand Gregory's intent first. Now, I know people will look towards other alternative sources other than the games, and that's fine if you guys want to do that, but I'm somebody that just looks at the games and sort of digests what I get from the games. Mainly that he doesn't really have a home, as it's seen through one of the endings. And I think that's interesting, that he doesn't have a home, because, well, somebody would have to have brought him into the world, his mother, but he doesn't have a mother, at least that we see in the DLC. At least that we see, we don't see any form of parental guardian in Gregory's life. Now, does that mean that Gregory is homeless? Not necessarily. I think, to me, it's even possible that Gregory does have parents and he does have a home, but he's either run away for whatever reason, or just ended up being locked in the Pizzaplex and being lost, which is why we see in one of the endings he's just outside because he doesn't know how to get back to his home. He's getting himself into a lot of trouble, and he doesn't really have a sense of danger, right? He doesn't really treat what he's doing as maybe this is a bad idea, because in the game he hides inside Freddy's chest cavity, which I think to me gives a little bit of an indication that maybe Gregory, out of all the animatronics, likes Glamrock Freddy. At least it seems that way, because yes, he does break down on the stage. We don't exactly know why Glamrock Freddy malfunctioned, because, well, why didn't all the other animatronics malfunction? Why was it unique to Glamrock Freddy? If they're all tapped in the same security network or whatever. So what you need to know though is that in the introduction, the opening cinematic for Security Breach, the first impression of the game that we have, the story makes it a point to make a note that this is where our story starts and this is where everything is starting to happen. And at the same time, while all this is happening, Glamrock Freddy locks eyes with somebody in the crowd, or he locks, he's looking at whoever is in the crowd, and this presumably is the thing that causes him to malfunction, because all the other animatronics do not malfunction in the same way. Now, whether this means that maybe Glamrock Freddy has his own, he has his own issues, maybe he's in need of repair, if that's a possibility. It seems like out of all the animatronics, Glamrock Freddy is the only one that has an error on stage, causing him to fall and plummet. But I really do think that Gregory is still... he's still human. He's not a mimic, although the mimic has taken his voice, not his likeness though, weirdly enough, but the mimic has mimicked so that the mimic could lure Cassie to the place. And by the way, I mean, it has to have some sort of brain. It has to know, because the mimic, here's the thing that gets me here. Remember how I was talking about earlier, how it describes Gregory as somebody that's really creative and, and all those things. To me, the mimic can't be creative because it can only mimic things. It can only do that. So the mimic, to me, cannot be creative. It cannot create things because it's always relying on mimicking the person and its behaviors. It can't really make new behaviors on its own. And I feel like this would contribute to the reasoning that Gregory is actually Gregory. Gregory is a real person. Gregory isn't a robot out here trying to, be a robot. That they are actually a real human being that has had something happen to him, which is why he is missing in the events that in the game. But even then, we see that there is the silhouette of Gregory on the newspapers in the comic strips that we see. He is literally on the newspapers, which is very interesting because if he is missing, he's aware that he is missing, then what does that mean for the story? What happened to Gregory? What caused him to end up going missing? We don't know the inciting incident, but it could just be that the events of the first game are what caused Gregory to go missing. Now, whether or not Gregory intentionally wanted to go missing or not, or he just ended up going missing for whatever reasoning, the fact that there is some sort of he's identified within these newspapers tells me to believe that they might not know who who Gregory is, but they know that he is gone. They know that he's gone. So Gregory does probably have a family, because why would there be anybody looking for him if there's a missing person report? Or he has somebody to go back to. So I think what this tells us is that Gregory, he's talking to Cassidy, he's communicating with her, he's trying to reach out to her in this sort of spirit realm, AR spirit realm. But he's trying to reach out to her, he's trying to talk to her, but she's just listening to the wrong Gregory, apparently. And the wrong Gregory has other intentions, the wrong, trying to keep it trapped there. And there's probably somebody else in this whole thing that's causing all this to happen. But anyway, that's pretty much it. Oh, also the one thing I wanted to mention about the setting that I think is very important is the earthquake. This is something that I didn't even realize whenever I first looked at the game, but the newspapers on the windows say that an earthquake occurred. Now, whether or not that this was an actual earthquake or not, or maybe it was caused by some other means, somebody saying that an earthquake would occur could explain how damaged it is, and would explain that the amount of time that was passed. Because if an actual earthquake occurred, it would make sense that, it wouldn't, for example, if this was a few months after Gregory went missing, or maybe even a few weeks after Gregory went missing and somehow there was an earthquake, it would make complete sense, because an earthquake would damage so much stuff in such a shorter amount of time that it would make sense why the Pizzaplex is so ruined as it is, right? But then again, it has to be around for at least a little bit, because there's already vandals that are obviously literally putting messages in the Pizzaplex. So it at least has to have maybe a week or more or something like that where he's ended up missing. Now, it could take place so much time after that. It could take place I don't know, it could, for all we know, this could be some sort of weird time jump, but then it wouldn't make any sense, because then who is this Gregory? Who is this? Because if Gregory would probably be really old by that point if he's entered the Pizzaplex, unless this character in the original game, this Gregory is not Gregory, and it's some sort of copy, or this one is, I don't know, a completely different character. But anyway, that's all I have to say for now on Security Breach. I really think that it was a good shift in the right direction. I think there's a lot of things about the game though that are not so great, but I think the experience overall is good. I think it's a lot shorter, and I understand why it is. DLCs end up being a little bit shorter. But I think it was great. It was a great DLC. It had a lot of good things in it, and the one thing I'm not really happy about is it just made the story a lot more confusing again. I think it should have just answered a lot of things before dumping all this other new stuff onto the plate. So that's all I have to say for now. So thank you for watching, and stay tuned for other stuff on this channel. So anyway, to put it simply, I think... Alright, anyway, to sort of to wind things down, to make things more approachable for our understanding, I think what is happening here is through the AR world, we're exposed to certain things like noises and almost these auditory and visual hallucinations, which I don't really think are supposed to be there. I think either something has caused them to be there or they aren't supposed to be there. The security mask, whoever has the security mask, the user of that security mask imprint on the actual AR itself. So that's why we see a lot of weird things with the AR. These are things that Cassie herself, these are things that are in her psyche that are being, bleeding into the AR, that are basically being there that are actually just being present in the AR. So the reason why something like Gregory appears in the AR, which we do see him appear in a little cutout with Cassie, this really just tells me that Cassie is, Gregory is Cassie's friend. They do know each other because there's, for the AR to create these cutouts, which is probably just from Cassie's own memories, it would make sense that they have probably known each other and they probably do have some sort of connection. I mean, we knew that from the start, because why would you just go to this random place without actually knowing who Gregory is? Unless they're maybe like pen pals or something, but I hugely doubt that these two kids just know each other, but they don't actually know each other in person. I feel like they do know each other, or at least they did know each other, and that's why she's wanting to go to this location to go and save him. Because otherwise, I feel like you don't just go to a random, dilapidated, broken down place that you're probably not even supposed to go into, unless it's to like save them and get them out of there. But this does tell us more about Cassidy, in that Cassidy, for some reason, has, in the AR that we see of Cassidy, she's sort of crying, and then Gregory is there kind of almost comforting her, and then there's one cutout, I think, in that same thing of her just by herself, which tells me that she feels alone. Maybe there's some feelings there of her feeling alone, or maybe it's just like maybe symbolic of the game itself. Maybe she feels alone, she's being left in this abandoned Pizzaplex, and Gregory is trying to go there and comfort her, but she just ends up being alone. I think that's a possibility, but here's what I think is actually going on. We hear, I'm pretty sure, maybe I'm mishearing this, maybe I'm reading into this. When we put on the mask, we can hear the voices of the Glamrocks, but we can also hear like voices of Gregory coming in and coming out. And I think what's going on here is, I think Gregory, he is a spirit. I think this is actually the case, because in the game, he's telling us things. He's like saying, it's kind of hard to hear all of this audio, and maybe I'm reading into this a little bit too much. Like maybe he's not actually telling us those things, and maybe it's just through the walkie-talkie. But I'm pretty sure if this is completely 100% correct, and Gregory is particularly speaking here, I think that's what's happened to him. I think Gregory has either been somehow in this AR world, or he's kind of somehow his voice is coming through the AR mask hallucinations that are going on, the auditory hallucinations, or I guess it's not necessarily auditory if it's something that is occurring within the AR mask, but it's something that I think is interesting in this sort of AR world, that we hear, Gregory speaking and him kind of coming in and coming out and fading in, fading out. I think to me this kind of suggests that Gregory is alive. Is something has happened to him. He is no longer, he's in some sort of transient state where he's not there. He's not at the Pizzaplex. We know that. I guess we knew that from the ending. He's not there. But whether or not the voice at the ending of the game is actually Gregory, I doubt it. Because the whole game, the whole point of this game was whether we can trust Gregory or not, and you know what's going on with Gregory, basically. And so it kind of reminds me of Sister Location, where it's like you can't really trust the voice that speaks. And I think, to me, at the ending, I do not think that was Gregory. Because, for one, why would Gregory, the kid, why would he know the company's secrets? Why would he know that? I mean, you could say that he found out, and maybe Glamrock Freddy is actually the one that's helping him. But from what I understand, this Gregory at the ending isn't Gregory. It's not. It just simply isn't. The behavior seems off to me, even though it's trying to convince you, hey, this is Gregory. Gregory's a traitor. He's gonna leave her behind. To me, it seems very meant to mislead us and to suggest that, oh, this is just, like, oh, how could you do this, Greg? How could you do this? Gregory was the real evil guy this whole time. I don't think that's what the case is. I think the case is that Gregory, something has happened to him. He's no longer there at the Pizzaplex, and he's not a robot. The Mimic, by the way, I have some thoughts on it, which I'm going to go into a little bit here. The Mimic does have the same eye color as Gregory. That is something to keep in mind. He does have the same eye color as Gregory. Does that mean that the Mimic is Gregory? No. I think if we look at it like this, is like the Mimic is meant to mimic whatever, it's supposed to, right? And if we believe that from the beginning Gregory was a robot and Gregory was the Mimic from the entirety of when he first started out, I think that fails to acknowledge that if the Mimic is Gregory, right? Which maybe it is, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. If the Mimic is Gregory, I don't think the Mimic at all could be Gregory. I don't think that the Mimic was Gregory. I know that they have the same eye color, and that's kind of interesting that that is the case. But I think what's going on here is, even looking at the teeth for the Mimic, they do kind of look humanoid. I think there's like maybe 9 teeth on each row of teeth, which is atypical for an animatronic, which would imply that it is more of a humanoid animatronic and meant to, like, why would you need that many teeth for an animatronic, especially since all the animatronics do not have that teeth shape. It would imply that it is meant to be more humanoid. But then again, in the burn trap ending, that could be the Mimic, guys, because if you look at the inside burn trap, looking just at the teeth, the eyes are not similar at all, but the teeth are very similar in the burn trap suit. But then there's other things that are kind of unexplained, like if the Mimic is burn trap, then what does that mean for the Blob? Because the Blob was the one at the ending to basically capture burn trap. We don't really know what happened after that. And by the way, I actually do want to sort of, I know this is about everything else, but one thing that I've kept in mind, and I think maybe something that makes sense to me, is that the Blob is probably, if we're being honest, it's probably the Golden Freddy. Because if you really think about it, Golden Freddy was the only one in FNaF, or was it the Ultimate Custom Night, and in the ending to not move on. And I think, to me, that just shows that Golden Freddy is still in the Blob and still, angry and vengeful. I think that is definitely the case. I think he is still around, and I think the Blob is he's just alone now. He's just on his own. The Blob is just Golden Freddy, okay? I think that is the case. Now, what does this mean for everything else? What does this mean for the series? What is going on here? There's so much stuff going on. Who's the Mimic? Like I said, guys, the eye color, yes, there is an uncanny resemblance, guys, that the eye color has to Gregory's eyes. There's a lot of features that would imply that the Mimic is supposed to be human, or that it's meant to mimic the behaviors of a person, which I guess does make sense. But here's the thing. Who who would have to be around Gregory? How would the mimic know to mimic Gregory? How would the mimic know how Gregory acts? How would the mimic have his voice? Well, it's established in the earlier in the chapters that basically you can have your voice be recreated by I think it was it the mask? Basically your voice can be recreated by the security system. And yeah, that's a feature apparently. So it's not really an indication that the mimic actually has been around Gregory and has basically subsumed Gregory. Maybe, something befell Gregory from the mimic. But I do think, from what we're supposed to believe with this, I think what happened to Gregory is, I'm sorry to say it, I think Gregory is not alive anymore. I do not think he's the mimic, because I think the mimic is its own animatronic Indo that had a specific design purpose to it, but things ended up going wrong. And when I do think of the mimic, I think about the Indos in the there's one Indo, there's basically an image in the game, which I'll put up here, but basically it showcases, I think one of the Indos, basically treating a child that has been harmed by something. And I think honestly, this is the mimic, because we see in this that there's bunny ears drawn around it, and I think that this is the actual mimic. I think this is where the mimic program probably started. I think the pizzeria was testing, because they have a daycare attendant, to keep the children at night going to bed on time. But what I actually think what happened here is, I think after the whole daycare thing, and I think honestly what's going on here is, I think they made this animatronic, Fazbear Entertainment made this animatronic for whatever reason. I think mostly it was probably to make things, some people say, oh, it's to make it easier for them to program stuff in it. But I think this was just made for some reason to pacify something, to make it so that there isn't as many accidents, maybe as a thing to reduce the amount of harm that is caused, and to be there for the children at the Pizzaplex to make sure things go swell, right? And I think eventually something went wrong. Maybe Gregory's Glamrock Freddy man, maybe he was the mimic, I guess. Maybe this was the mimic. Maybe what we see, maybe basically, that's actually something interesting to think about, is when we get all the parts in Security Breach, when you get Roxy's eyes and all of the parts, what if this was just literally the mimic? The mimic is using all of these parts in its system. But then again, Chiga's voice box is something that you can collect in the game, which does tell me that the mimic is not Glamrock Freddy. I mean, I don't know why I would think that, but... So here's what I think. I think Gregory, he's gone. He's either not alive, or he's in some sort of weird state. Weird, he's not even, maybe even there. Maybe he's trying to contact Cassidy, but Cassidy doesn't hear him. She doesn't know that he's there. He's kind of speaking to her, he's talking to her, but she can't really hear him, because he's in, she can only hear him through this AR world, and he's talking to him. The real Gregory is talking to him, trying to reach out. The real Gregory wants the best for Cassidy, I think. It isn't trying to go out here and make the elevator shaft fall on her. Make the elevator shaft fall. I don't think that's Gregory would even have access to that, even if he did, because in this way, why would that even matter? You know what I mean? It just doesn't make any sense, okay? And I do think that the mimic has some sort of relevance into everything. It definitely has more importance that we have really not seen yet. But anyway. So basically what I'm trying to say, what I'm trying to get out here, is that Gregory is a real human. He's not a robot. He's not any weird mimic creature that, he's not a mimic. At least I don't think he is. I think what happened to Gregory is something bad happened to him. Now, here's the thing. They talk about, I think in the original game, they talk about how there's these things in the patient's tapes. They talk about them. A cascade of sub-processes have become intentional parts of the security system. So basically what this means is that a cascade of sub-processes eventually created some sort of intentional functionality. So this intentional functionality, I'm not entirely sure of what this is, but I find this very interesting that no one really talks about this part of the narrative. Most people focus on other things that are like the blob or whatever, but most people don't talk about how when the CDs talk about basically the idea that there's something in the program, or I guess maybe in the security program, that had these sub-processes that were part of that program, right? Either they had some sort of, I don't know, have some sort of, like, basically it seems like they were hijacked almost, that they were used for ways that weren't meant to be used. And what this caused is all these sub-processes, right? Or I guess you could say these child processes were being cascaded, down from the main process of the entire network. And what this caused is it caused some sort of, intentional functionality into the programming of the network. So basically what this means is from all these processes being somehow, I guess, intercepted or whatever, it caused some sort of, I guess maybe you could say, some sort of intentional programming that wasn't, like, originally it was not part of the actual network. In the actual books, it describes Gregory as this hacker, like, he's going into things, he's a hacker. And interestingly enough, in the patient CDs, if we believe that is Gregory, which I guess it probably is, that would mean one thing. When the therapist describes in the CDs, and I remember this line because it really stands out. The therapist says, "Do you know what the word hacking means?" And I find that interesting because it really tells us that Gregory is probably suspect for having this technical know-how and sort of potentially causing issues for the pizzeria, and some sort of interrogation that they have through, I guess, the guise of, oh, this is therapy for you. But how they actually, like, here's what actually I think, this probably will make sense to you. If Gregory is actually an orphan, what could have happened is maybe the actual Pizzaplex, the people that own the Pizzaplex, maybe even somebody that's working at Phasmer Entertainment, maybe in order to, get this child to whoever because they obviously don't know who this person is. I think Gregory's identity is completely unknown. He's not on any of the systems. He does not exist. If there's no profile for Gregory, which, assuming that this takes place in the future, which it's more futuristic, having a profile on somebody like a human, a person that is alive, should feel more easier to profile somebody based on that, information that you have on whoever you have it on, right? So if the security, the people that are at Phasmer Entertainment that are in charge of the security, and this tells me that Gregory either has some sort of history with the Pizzaplex, or there's something more about Gregory's backstory as a character that makes him sort of drawn to a place like the Pizzaplex, because why is he drawn to the Pizzaplex? If he is some sort of orphan without a home, then why would he be drawn to the Pizzaplex? If he, maybe he's even homeless, we don't even know. Or he could just be away from home, maybe he ran away from home. We don't really know, but somebody would have to clothe Gregory. How would he have clothes? If he didn't have, he had to come from somewhere, is what I'm trying to suggest. He's not just some child that just, was left in the streets. There's somebody that had to be a parent to him, or had to be some sort of guardian for him. I mean, if you believe that he's a robot, then this doesn't really, apply. But I think it's more likely that he is a real child, because there's a little bit of a design quirk that I've noticed about Gregory, and it's the fact that he has a band-aid on his cheek. A lot of people don't point this out, and they kind of ignore this for whatever reason, but him having a band-aid at all signifies that he's a real child, because a robot would not need a band-aid, okay? I think a robot having a band-aid would suggest that it's just a weird, like, I get what they're, like, it's maybe a way to convince it, to convince you that maybe, because he has a mark on his cheek, just because he has a band-aid on his cheek, that means that he's not a robot. Like, it's a way to convince you, oh, this is not a robot. But I think if we really think about it, him having a band-aid at all, like, just having like a band-aid on his face at all, would suggest that not only is he, being taken care of, or maybe he's taking care of himself at this point, he's also human, just like you and me. He's a human being. He gets hurt. And the fact that he does have band-aids on him shows that he is getting into these situations that would cause him to get hurt. So I think knowing all this, knowing that he's a hacker, potentially, I think he probably is a hacker, guys. Maybe he isn't. Maybe he's just somebody that's knows his stuff. Maybe he just has some sort of arcane, esoteric knowledge on how to hack these animatronics and stuff like that. He could actually be an important character that we don't actually know yet. Like, he could have some sort of big lore significance to him that we're not really seeing yet. Like, maybe he's like one of the children of somebody, or maybe he's important in some way. We don't really know. But in terms of how everything has gone and played out during the DLC, and now what we know about Gregory, I'm going to say that Gregory is a human, or at least he was a human, and that from the DLC, from the beginning of the DLC to the end of the DLC, we don't know where Gregory is. My personal thing from looking at the DLC, and what I'm going to suggest here, I do think that something happened to Gregory. I don't know exactly the specifics on what happened to him, but I do think it relates to the new AR world that we're in, right, in the game. The AR world that exists, where everything is distorted. There's different things that show up. There's a weird rabbit creature, which I'm not even going to get into that because that's a huge thing to talk about. There's just a lot of stuff that's happening in this DLC.